Under the dim light of remorse and redemption, Will found himself staring into a mirror that reflected not only his face, but also every regret he had ever tried to bury. The decision to hire a lawyer for Luna wasn't born out of pity, nor was it the result of an impulsive emotion. It came from the realization that he had been complicit in her fall. Somewhere between his ambition and his pursuit of perfection, he had left behind a woman who once believed that love could save her. When he learned that Luna was pregnant and still behind bars, something inside him broke. The world that had once seemed logical and structured now trembled beneath the weight of his guilt. He could no longer ignore the image of a child born into abandonment, a child repeating the same cycle of loss and rejection that had defined Luna's own tragic past. Will's understanding of Luna changed with every memory that resurfaced. He remembered her laughter that once filled their small apartment, the way she had tried to hide her insecurities behind defiance, and the moments when she begged him to stay, not because she was weak, but because she knew the darkness that loneliness could breed. Now, watching her confined to a cell, awaiting trial, he finally understood what that darkness had done to her. She wasn't evil. She was broken, shaped by neglect, betrayal, and the suffocating fear of being forgotten. That realization haunted him more than any crime she might have committed. To Will, she wasn't just a woman accused by the system. She was a reflection of everything he had failed to protect. The night he met with her lawyer was one of silent reckoning. The air was heavy, the room cold, but Will's voice was steady as he said he wanted to ensure Luna would be out before giving birth. The attorney looked at him with quiet disbelief, perhaps sensing the emotional storm beneath his calm demeanor. But Will's mind was already made up. He would face the ridicule, the confusion, the judgment of those around him, because for the first time, he wasn't acting out of pride but atonement. When he returned home to Electra, the life they had carefully built together, modern, peaceful, filled with plans and promises, suddenly felt like a borrowed dream. The walls of their new house seemed to echo with the fragility of everything he had once believed permanent. Electra, radiant and trusting, had been his sanctuary, a reminder that he could start over. Yet, as he watched her prepare dinner that night, humming softly to herself, Will's chest tightened with unbearable guilt. He knew that every smile she gave him was one he could no longer return honestly. The following morning, his decision came crashing down between them like a storm that no one saw coming. When Will told Electra he wanted to end things, her first reaction was disbelief, the kind of stunned silence that follows a gunshot. Her hands trembled slightly, her lips parted as if to form a question, but no words came. Will's expression remained composed, though his eyes betrayed the inner turmoil tearing him apart. He told her he wanted to make things right for Luna, that he could not abandon her or their unborn child. It wasn't just a moral obligation, it was something deeper, something that pulled at the very core of who he was. Electra's confusion quickly turned into suspicion. She searched his face for clues, fear, coercion, or hidden motives, anything that could explain why the man who once swore to love her now spoke like a stranger. In her mind, it didn't make sense. The timing, the suddenness, the cold certainty in his tone, all of it felt wrong. She began to wonder if someone was manipulating him. Will had seemed distracted lately, his phone calls more frequent, his gaze often distant as if listening to an invisible voice. Could someone, perhaps evenly, be threatening him? The thought chilled her. Lee had never hidden her disdain for Luna and had the means to control people through fear. Electra couldn't dismiss the possibility that Will's decision wasn't entirely his own. Her desperation led her to plead with him, her words tumbling out between sobs and disbelief, but Will remained unmoved. It wasn't that he didn't feel her pain, it was that he couldn't allow himself to stay. Every second he lingered near Electra was another lie. His conscience had become a battlefield where love and guilt collided, and guilt had finally won. As she reached for his hand, he stepped back, whispering something about responsibility, about doing the right thing, though the phrases sounded hollow even to him. He knew that walking away from Electra was an act of destruction, but in his mind, it was also the only path toward redemption. After Will left, Electra's world collapsed into a haze of unanswered questions. She replayed every moment they had shared, searching for signs of deceit or warning. The tenderness of his touch, the sincerity in his voice, the plans they made for the future. How could all of that evaporate overnight? Her heart refused to believe that the man she loved could simply choose another woman, especially one with Luna's past. Something darker had to be at play. And so, as grief hardened into determination, Electra made a vow to uncover the truth. If Will was being threatened, she would find out by whom. If someone was manipulating him, they would pay. Meanwhile, Will's life became a quiet tragedy of its own. Each day he visited Luna's lawyer, he felt the growing distance between his new reality and the life he had destroyed. He imagined Luna's face when she would hear the news, disbelief mixed with fragile hope. The thought of her child stirred emotions he had long suppressed. He wasn't sure if he could love Luna again, but he knew he could not let her face motherhood alone behind bars. Perhaps, in helping her, he could finally forgive himself. When Luna finally received word of his actions, her reaction wasn't the triumphant joy some might expect. It was shock, a deep, trembling disbelief that left her speechless. For so long, she had seen Will as the man who turned away when she needed him most, the one who left her to face the chaos she couldn't control. Now, the same man was fighting to free her, to give her child a chance at life. Her mind raced with confusion and suspicion, torn between gratitude and fear. What if this was pity? What if Will was acting out of guilt, not love? And yet, beneath those doubts, a fragile hope began to grow, a hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely forgotten. As weeks passed, Will's visits to Luna's lawyer became more frequent, and the case slowly shifted in her favor. But the closer Luna came to freedom, the more tormented Will became. Each victory in court was another wound in his heart, a reminder that redemption always came at a price. At night, he would sit alone in the house he once shared with Electra, haunted by her absence. He could still smell her perfume on the pillows, still see her laughter lingering in the corners of the room. But he couldn't go back. He had chosen his path, and it led straight into uncertainty. Electra, on the other hand, turned her grief into action. She began to follow the threads of Will's sudden change, digging through phone records, tracing visits, and reaching out to people who might have seen or heard something. Her instincts told her that Lee was involved, the same Lee who had connections to Luna's case, the same Lee who had once warned Will about unfinished business. The more Electra uncovered, the more sinister the picture became. It wasn't just about love or guilt. It was about control, power, and secrets buried deep within the pasts of all three, Will, Luna, and Lee. In her pursuit of truth, Electra stumbled upon a series of letters, and signed, unmarked, but unmistakably threatening, hidden in Will's desk drawer. The words were vague but chilling, filled with veiled warnings about what would happen if he didn't make things right. The handwriting, though carefully disguised, bore traces of familiarity. Electra's mind raced. Was this why Will looked so tormented? Had someone blackmailed him into walking away from her? Meanwhile, Luna's pregnancy advanced, and her time in prison grew more unbearable. Her nights were filled with dreams of freedom, of a life where her child could run under sunlight instead of fluorescent lights. When the lawyer informed her that the hearing was moving forward, she couldn't stop the tears. She whispered Will's name like a prayer, wondering if he truly meant to stand by her or if his kindness was just another illusion destined to vanish. Will's confession to himself was simple but devastating. He couldn't stop caring. Whether it was love, guilt, or penance, the emotion consuming him felt absolute. He was willing to sacrifice everything, his home, his reputation, his peace, for Luna and the unborn child. He imagined the day she would walk out of prison, her body frail but her eyes alive again. He would be there, waiting. He would take her hand and promise a new beginning. He would build a home not out of perfection but forgiveness. But destiny rarely rewards broken hearts so easily. Electra's investigation led her deeper into shadows she wasn't prepared to face. As she pieced together fragments of Will's secret life, she realized that his decision might not have been as selfless as it seemed. There were debts, secrets, and past crimes entangled between Luna and Lee, crimes that could destroy more than one life. The discovery filled Electra with dread. If she confronted Will now, she might lose him forever. But if she stayed silent, he might never escape the manipulation surrounding him. In the quiet of his remorse, Will didn't realize that by trying to save Luna, he was walking straight into a web of deceit spun long before he met either woman. Luna's freedom could come at a cost neither of them foresaw, and Electra's determination to uncover the truth could turn her into the next target of those who wanted the past buried. As Luna's due date approached, the emotional gravity of Will's choices began to crush him. The dream of redemption blurred into obsession. He spent sleepless nights envisioning a family that might never truly exist, haunted by the image of Electra's tear-stained face. Love had never felt so heavy. It was no longer a promise, but a punishment. Yet, he couldn't turn back. Not when Luna's life, and the life of their child, hung in the balance. In the end, 3 hearts were left tethered by the same tragedy. One seeking forgiveness, one searching for truth, and one trying to survive. Will believed he could rewrite the past, but fate had already written its final act. And as Electra's shadow drew closer to the dangerous truth behind his decision, she began to understand that love, in its purest form, was never gentle. It was a war fought between what we owe to others and what we owe to ourselves, and sometimes, in the name of saving someone else, we lose the very soul we were trying to protect. When Luna finally walked out of the prison gates, the morning sun washed over her like forgiveness, made tangible. The cold steel that had surrounded her for months was replaced by warmth, light, and the sight of Will waiting beyond the barrier. For a moment, she didn't move. Her hands trembled, her breath caught in her throat as though the air itself felt too free, too unreal. Will's eyes met hers, and in that gaze she saw everything she had stopped believing in: redemption, love, and the fragile hope of beginning again. When he reached for her, she hesitated, haunted by the shame of her past, but his hand didn't falter. That single gesture shattered the invisible chains still binding her spirit. They left together that day in silence, driving away from the place that had defined her worst years. The air between them was fragile, but full of possibility. At Will's house, their house now, Luna was overwhelmed by its simplicity. There were no luxury trappings, only a small garden, a narrow porch, and the faint scent of lilacs from the vase Electra had once placed there. Will hadn't moved them. Perhaps it was guilt, or perhaps it was his way of honoring what once was. Luna said nothing. She only ran her fingers over the petals, feeling a strange ache of both gratitude and sorrow. News of their reunion spread faster than either had anticipated. In a town that thrived on judgment, everyone had an opinion. Katie's voice was the loudest among them, sharp and unyielding, accusing Will of madness for throwing away a stable life for a woman like Luna. Bill was worse. His anger came not from misunderstanding but from disappointment. To him, Will's actions were weakness disguised as compassion. "You can't save a storm by loving it," he had told him once. But Will no longer cared about saving storms or reputations. He had seen too much to value approval over authenticity. He was determined to stand beside Luna, even if the world turned against them. Their wedding was small, almost defiant in its simplicity. A handful of people attended, a few who still believed in second chances, and a few who simply couldn't look away from the spectacle. Luna wore a plain white dress, nothing grand or extravagant, just soft fabric that clung gently to her growing belly. Her smile was hesitant but real. Will stood beside her, his expression calm, though his hands shook slightly as he held the ring. When they exchanged vows, there was no orchestra, no applause, only the murmur of wind through the trees and the quiet conviction in their voices. Katie refused to attend. Bill, too, stayed away, his absence looming like a silent verdict. Even Electra, though heartbroken, could not bring herself to witness it. But Will didn't waver. When he looked at Luna under the faint shimmer of candlelight, he saw not the mistakes she had made but the resilience that had carried her through them. He saw a woman scarred yet unbroken, fragile yet capable of immense strength. After the ceremony, as guests departed and dusk settled around their modest home, Luna stood at the window watching the horizon. She could hear laughter from distant neighbors, feel the faint rhythm of life returning to her. But inside, she carried a quiet fear, the fear that this happiness might be temporary, that her past could still swallow them whole. Will joined her, placing his hand gently over hers. For the first time, she allowed herself to lean into him completely. In that closeness, he whispered promises she didn't ask for, promises not of perfection but of effort, patience, and faith. Days turned into weeks, and their life began to take form. Will worked long hours to provide stability, while Luna focused on rebuilding herself. She attended counseling sessions, met with social workers, and began writing letters to other women in the system, offering them hope. Each small act of kindness she performed was a step toward reclaiming her identity. Will watched her transformation with quiet pride. He had once thought he was rescuing her, but the truth was she was rescuing both of them. Yet the world outside their walls was not so forgiving. Bill used his influence to quietly sabotage Will's work, spreading whispers about his judgment, questioning his credibility. Katie confronted Luna at a charity event, warning her that she would never be accepted in their circle. The cruelty was sharp, but Luna endured it with grace. Every insult reminded her that her survival wasn't dependent on acceptance. She had something stronger now, Will's unwavering love and the life growing inside her. One evening, after another tense confrontation with Bill, Will came home visibly shaken. He found Luna reading on the couch, her hand resting gently on her stomach. The sight of her grounded him instantly. She looked up, sensing his distress, but before she could speak, he knelt before her and took her hands. The words came slowly, haltingly, but they carried the weight of his soul. He told her that he loved her, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because she had shown him a kind of truth he never knew he needed. She had stripped away his illusions, forced him to confront the selfishness behind his so-called virtue, and taught him that redemption wasn't found in fixing someone else, but in standing beside them through the pain. Tears filled Luna's eyes. For so long, she had doubted his affection, fearing it was nothing more than pity. But in that moment, as she felt the sincerity in his trembling hands, she knew it was real. It wasn't a fairy tale love, perfect and pure. It was raw, wounded, and deeply human, the kind of love born from shared scars. In the months that followed, they prepared for the arrival of their child. The nursery was simple, a small room painted in soft blue, filled with second-hand furniture and dreams too fragile to name. Will often stayed up late, his hands resting on Luna's stomach, feeling the faint kicks beneath her skin. Those quiet hours became his sanctuary, proof that beauty could emerge even from the ruins of pain. Still, their peace was not without shadow. Electra's silence haunted him. He sometimes wondered what she was doing, whether she had found closure or still searched for the truth behind his decision. But every time those thoughts threatened to consume him, Luna's voice would bring him back. She spoke of the future, of their child, of new beginnings, of the life they were building together. When their baby finally arrived, it felt as though time itself paused. The delivery was long and exhausting, but when Luna held their daughter for the first time, the world seemed to quiet around them. Will stood beside her, tears streaking down his face, overwhelmed by the enormity of what they had created. In that small hospital room, surrounded by beeping machines and soft cries, they found something sacred. Later that night, as Luna slept, Will sat by her bedside watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. The love he felt wasn't just for the woman she was now, but for every version of her that had survived. The girl who had been abandoned, the woman who had fought her way back, and the mother who now held hope in her arms. He knew their path would never be easy. The world would keep judging, keep doubting. But none of it mattered. For the first time in his life, Will felt free, not from obligation or guilt, but from the fear of living truthfully. And Luna, in her quiet resilience, proved that redemption wasn't something granted by others. It was something earned, day by day, through courage, forgiveness, and love that refused to break under pressure. As dawn crept through the hospital window, illuminating the faces of the small family, Will whispered the only truth that mattered, that he didn't just want to save her, he wanted to live beside her, through every storm, until light found them.